I fell out that tree, and there it was. I was trying to send, messages, telepathic messages to my mom, telling her that I loved her. I didn't think I would have survived that incident. I thought he would have absolutely flattened me. And I got up, and he had kind of relaxed with my presence. And after about 10 minutes of him being underneath the tree, I fell out the tree, and he kind of looked at me and just carried on, kind of, eating the food that was in his cheek.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Xpect Performance podcast. And with me today, I have Blackfoot Safaris owner and ranger Julian Geerts on the show. In this episode, I particularly enjoyed Julian's new approach to conservation and how he sheds light on what it means to be mindful in the African bush, even for somebody like him, and how it impacts the way that he gives his tours, as well as some really cool and interesting stories about how Blackfoot Safaris got its name, as well as some tales about some of our favorite animals in the African bush. I must apologize this episode for the poor quality in the audio, particularly from my side. I have a saying that done is better than perfect, and in an attempt to get a variety of guests from all across the country, the audio from my side wasn't great, so please persevere. It's a wonderful episode, especially if you like the outdoors. And as always, like, share, subscribe, and enjoy. So, Julian, if I'm not mistaken, have founded your business, which is called Blackfoot Safaris. So, can
Yes.
you explain a little? It's quite a unique name. So, can you tell me a little bit about what happened, if anything did happen, that led to the naming of your business being Blackfoot Safaris?
Yes, absolutely. So it's a long story. So, we have time, but it started 8 years ago. I was working in a reserve in KwaZulu-Natal, and I was a resident guide in the lodge. I was head guide at the lodge, and we were having a coffee on the porch after game drive, and we got a rather strange phone call from a lady that wanted to release black-footed cats back into the reserve. She then proceeded with, threatening to send them off to Germany. And coincidentally, a few days before the phone call, I had been contacted by the Black-footed Cat Working Group as a Black Rhino monitor. I was, for a short time in my career, I was a Black Rhino monitor, and we used the old school telemetry sets, which is, not everyone knows how to use them. It's not the GPS systems that you can log onto an app and see where the animals were. So I worked for the Black Rhino expansion program, and I knew how to operate the telemetry. I was reached out to by the Black-footed Cat Working Group, and I had never even heard of these cats. And they needed a monitor to monitor these black-footed cats on a soft release. I think at the time there was only 6 or 7 ever recorded releases. So I tried to get annual leave at the lodge, and I tried to go out and do this experience, and I wasn't allowed to. The lodge said, "No, we need you, unfortunately, and you may not take off the month to go and monitor these cats." Once again, I had no idea what these cats even were. Neither did many of my colleagues in the industry. It's an extremely rare cat. And this phone call of this lady that was threatening to release these black-footed cats on the side of the road. So anyways, we grabbed the stuff and we rushed over. It was about an hour's drive. And this lady wasn't up to much good. You could see that she was potentially trying to breed them, or who knows. I just said, look, I know the people that they have to go to. There's only one group of people that are really doing good work with these black-footed cats, which are a protected species. It's a very protected species. And back we went to the reserve. I said, no, it's fine. I'm going to call the Black-footed Cat Working Group, and I'll be able to get these cats to them in a matter of days. And 6 months later, and I still had the cats. It turned out to be an absolute roller coaster of emotions, of everything, of raising these cats. It was an experience that changed my life forever. And that was the time when I started up the safari business. In feeding, they have the fastest metabolism in the wild. And And yeah, I had to find between 20 and 30 mice per night, and the feeding started in the evening. And anyway, we went to fetch these cats in Newcastle, and it was quite clear that this lady was up to no good. There was other species in the house, and we later learned that it was so important for them to be quiet that they would normally be in a termite mound 4 or 5 meters below the termite mound during the daytime. They're an extremely secretive species, very nocturnal species. Anyways, we took the box, and I was trying to figure out where she got them. Was it a burn on the side of the road? Is there a reason that she got them? And the energy started turning a little bit. So we just took the boxes, and we wanted these cats to get into the right hands. So we took the box and we left, and we went straight to a vet who thankfully knew us because of the reserve that we worked at. We often had the vet out at the reserve for various reasons, whether it's a cheetah recollaring or whatever it was. And we went to the vet. We got a good checkup done on them, and at that stage I still thought I was going to have them for 2 or 3 days. Got back to the lodge, contacted an incredible lady in KwaZulu-Natal. She's the guru of rehabilitating and releasing cats into the wild. Last thing I wanted was for these cats to end up in Germany, so we had to go through the correct processes in order to have them released back into the wild. Under correct circumstances, done with with collar, with research, with follow-up, because it's quite a long, complicated soft release that you had to do with them. So 4 or 5 days later, this incredible lady who guided me through this all called me and said, I hate to tell you, but there is no one that is capable enough to in the whole country to actually raise these cats. We have to go through the correct processes. Those correct processes were to get an export permit for the current province that we lived in, that we stayed in, and that had to be an export permit, had to be done off of an import permit, which we were waiting for the second province where they ended up being released, and that was up in the Kalahari. We had to wait on them to get an import permit. There was an incredible group of people that up there were willing to invest the time and the funding and the volunteers to do a proper release. And that process, I thought it was going to be days. It ended up being a very long and tedious process. And yeah, eventually it took about 5 months. It was an extremely challenging time of my life, because I will happily raise a rat back into the wild if I can, give it the best chance you can to release. And now all of a sudden I had to do a lot of feeding, a lot of killing when we couldn't find mice and rats, because the pet stores in the area actually started, they saw me coming from a mile, and they thought I was up to some weird snake breeding or something, and I was just simply trying to feed these cats. But it had to remain extremely secretive. Even my own general manager at the lodge had no idea what was going on. He thought that I was potentially going down the road of depression or maybe even drugs. They kept asking me, is everything okay, Julian? You've gone from doing 5-hour game drives to doing 2.5-hour game drives, because I had to get back. I had to check on them. We had mice in the house. There was snakes that were attracted to the smell of the urine of the mice. I had to keep them in my room. I kept them in my room for 5 months. I basically slept on a mattress in the kitchen. We had to do a proper enclosure. We bought in, mats of grass, and it was a very long, tedious process. And looking after them started at about 10 o'clock in the evening, and it went right through to 5 in the morning. Now, as a guide, I'm waking up at 4:30 in the morning, so it was literally 6 months of very broken sleep during the day, which is where I completely understand my manager's concern of me being all of a sudden, depressed or whatever, or on drugs. But no, I just had to look after these cats, and my life took an absolute turn. So I had to raise these cats as well as possible, and that was the difficult thing. It's I just felt like I wanted to open the cage and let them go. But I kept being reminded, if we're to do this properly, for the cats to have the best chance of survival, we have to do this properly. We have to have them released in an area where we know that they thrive. And that was in the greater Kalahari area. That's where we have evidence of them thriving. So we had to get it done properly. It was extremely difficult with all the killing and stuff, but the lessons it taught me were absolutely incredible. Back to the question of the safari business, it was at that time that I was registering my safari business, and I thought, what a better time or what a better name, and chose Blackfoot Safaris. And it's a great fireside topic around the fire on safaris, and yeah, that's the name of my baby.
Yeah, I'm sure, man. And that is a hell of a story, and we'll get into some details, and I've got some questions to follow up on that in just a second. But for the listeners and for myself, because I don't know, what is a black-footed cat that you're speaking of? Why are they different to regular cats?
So what really blew my mind was that with all the research I did, one thing I realized is that we really know so little about these cats because of their secretive nature, because of the fact that they're living 16 hours a day, deep down in a termite mound. Humans have really not been able to do good research. Now, I've already made reference to the Black-footed cat working group. They're absolutely incredible people, and they're the only people that have even attempted to do some sort of research on the cats. They are a tiny little cat. They look like a leopard, and they have the character of a leopard or a tiger even. The Afrikaans name, I can't pronounce it well, but the Afrikaans name for the black-footed cat is the anthill tiger. They have an incredible defense display where it's like almost like they're spitting like a python, and they curl up with their back. I saw it quite a lot because in feeding times, as much as I was the one giving them food, these guys wanted nothing to do with me. I never touched them once. In 6 months, I couldn't touch them once. They were going to absolutely rip my hand apart. And back to the lady that released them, the reason I think she released them is that she thought she might have been able to maybe monetize them. We have the problem of many petting facilities in the country. She thought, okay, maybe she can sell. And then she weaned them, and she realized that there is no taming these cats, which is why you don't see them in zoos. It's impossible. The day that these cats are weaned, they want nothing to do with humans. There's no touching them. And it was quite an experience.
Yeah, that's quite something, and something that you were unexpectedly thrusted into, and despite the fact that you tried to explore all the most ethical avenues that you could to give these cats to somebody who was better suited to look after them, it turns out that fate, destiny, serendipity, the universe, whatever you want to call it, had other things in store for you. So
Absolutely.
I can imagine that must have been quite a transformative experience, especially somebody who is a nature lover like yourself. Moving on to other animals, with your guiding experience, you spend a lot of time in the bush, obviously. Is there an animal in the African bush that you admire the most, and why?
Well, I mean, one has to be the black-footed cat. I mean, I can talk about, I've never seen one in the wild, believe it or not. I've never seen one. We actually had one camera trap picture many years ago in KZN, which we were quite sure was a black-footed cat, but we couldn't prove it. There was too little information. But with all that I learned, it has to be the black-footed cat. Having said that, I actually have not seen one in the wild. I want to start actually doing one safari a year up in that area, whilst it's not the kind of area that a lot of travelers come to South Africa for. A lot of people come for Kruger, for Cape Town, etc. I do want to start doing one safari a year where we go back there and give back to the black-footed cats. Having said that, the one on safari that really, really, really gets me going on every single game drive, whilst it's amazing to see every animal and still react like it's the first time I see them, the leopard has to be probably the animal that gives me the most excitement every single morning when I go out on game drives. To the why, it's just because of their, similar to the black-footed cat, their secretive nature, the difficulty of us finding them. It makes it so special. It's an animal that really challenges all your senses. It really makes you switch all your senses on, and yeah, it's an incredible animal to find.
What are some tricks of the trade as a ranger that you might look to for clues as to finding where a leopard might be situated? Are there certain sounds, other disruptions, that maybe clues that other animals give away that gives you an opportunity to say, let's go and investigate that side, or let's go over there? There might be
Absolutely.
exploring.
And I think I sometimes have a sickness because every time I hear a bird alarm call, and at this time of the day, the birds alarm call for mongoose, they alarm call for many different things. They alarm call for eagles. They could even alarm for my little pooch that's in the garden. But I hear an alarm call, and there I am. I'm thinking there's a 1% chance it's a leopard, so I'm going to go and I'm going to look. Sometimes the trackers, I work in multiple different lodges as a private guide. I drive the game drive vehicle and I get a tracker. Sometimes the trackers just roll their eyes and look at me and say, are we really going to go and respond respond to this bird alarm calling. But, there's that 1 in 100 times where I turn around and I say, I told you, never ignore an alarm call. So there's many things, there's many things. You have to be really patient. A leopard can seriously teach you, patience and perseverance. I've once in the Sabi Sands, we left a leopard sighting early in the morning. The leopard was literally at the termite mound, waiting to pounce on a warthog. There was warthogs in the termite mounds that were using it as a burrow. And on that afternoon game drive, the leopard was still there. At the end of that evening game drive, the leopard was still there. The next morning, there was a warthog in a tree. We don't know at what time the kill happened, but it was well over 15 hours that leopard did not move a second. He did not move an inch, waiting patiently for that warthog to come out of its burrow.
Yeah, that's such a valuable lesson. There's so many things that life lessons that we can take from the African bush and apply in the context of our own lives. And one of the things that strikes me is, yes, patience. In 2024, the era of instant gratification, we tend to get impatient. Things aren't happening at the time that we'd like them to happen. And yet, just because we're doing something and you're putting in the work, for example, you're doing the research, you're building a business, you're working on your physique, you're tracking a leopard, philosophically, it's all the same thing. Is that sometimes things don't happen at the time that you would like them to happen, but they do eventually happen if you keep at it for long enough. And I think the African bush is a great example of that. Sometimes things don't happen when you'd like them to, but they will eventually. You just stay in the moment, stay in the present, listen to the
absolutely, and you have to allow them to happen. I can think of so many numerous times where I've seen a couple of other guides responding to a sighting, and it's a skittish leopard, it's lying, the visual's not good, and they leave, and that's them. They never return back to that sighting. And sometimes it's just about keeping your guests entertained at the same time, because when it comes to leopard, sometimes you have to wait hours and hours to get that activity, to get that action, because where there's leopards, there's action. But yeah, if you put in the time, it's almost 100% thing. You will be rewarded. You just need to be prepared to put in the time.
Yeah, absolutely, man. In your experience, you come into contact with wild animals, some big, some small. You must have found yourself in a sticky situation or two over the years. Can you care to elaborate on a memory or a nightmare of some kind where things started to go sour in a hurry?
This question has to bring me back to my days of black rhino monitoring. The bush is, whilst we hear of very few accidents, we do hear of accidents around us. Whilst it's a lot rarer to hear of a bush accident than what it is to hear of a motor, of a motor vehicle accident, they do happen. So we do have to be extremely careful when we're in the bush. We often jump off the vehicle to track animals. We often walk amongst us guides and colleagues, but we really use our senses. As we've briefly spoken about alarm calls. When it comes to big animals, you listen out for oxpeckers. Lions will often do a kind of a grunt at you before actually charging. The lions will give you a warning bark almost. It's like a burr. And if you hear these things, then and listen to the bush, you can actually navigate the bush quite safely, relatively safely. You can never be too safe. But being a black rhino monitor, the old telemetry sets were you really had to have your ear inside the set as you got closer to the animal. And part of the expansion project, there was big pressure to see these animals on a daily basis. There was no tourism in the reserve where I was a rhino monitor. And we had to, obviously for the poaching problem, but we also had to report a daily body condition just to see how well these animals were adapting. Black Rhino expansion program meant that you were releasing black rhinos back into the reserve. So we were using the telemetry sets, the old school telemetry sets, where you were listening to a very, very fine beep. And the closer you got to the animal, you had to bring this machine right up to your ear so that you could hear the beep of this direction. But the fact, and under the beep was the sound of like an old radio, a bit of a sound. So we had to bring our ears really close into this machine. And that made me miss a lot of telltale signs that there's dangerous animals in the bush. So here I'm walking, I'm feeling the pressure. I need to find this animal. I need to report the condition of this animal, but yet you're finding yourself in dangerous, sticky situations because I might have missed the lion track because I wasn't looking for the lion track. I had big pressure to find these black rhinos, and I missed a lot of telltale signs. I think one has to stand out where I was actually up a tree. Often, I quickly learned that the best way to find a black rhino whilst monitoring these animals was to get as close as possible and then climb a tree, get ready, start looking for your trees to climb, and then you can make a bit of noise. I would often get 2 sticks and then just hit the 2 sticks together. And an aggressive male black rhinos are very defensive. They're rather aggressive as well. Aggressive is not the right word. Sorry, they're very defensive. I don't like using the word aggressive, but yes, they're a lot more scary than white rhinos. So you would have to find a climbable tree, hit 2 sticks together, and that animal would approach you. And then I could take all the pictures that I needed to, because he was very, very, very interested and curious as to what that noise was. And then when he's within 20 meters of you, you start climbing that tree quite quickly. One day I fell out of that tree, and it was, I had a very old BlackBerry, so unfortunately I had no footage of it, but it would have been great footage. Not of me falling out, but up to the point of me falling out. And the little branch broke, and I fell down, and that rhino could have finished me off. And that's when I started realizing, hang on, they're actually not aggressive. They're very curious, and yes, maybe the best word that we can attribute to that behavior is aggressive, but it looked like I would have said he wanted me dead. I fell out that tree, and there it was. I was trying to send messages, telepathic messages to my mom, telling her that I loved her. I didn't think I would have survived that incident. I thought he would have absolutely flattened me. And I got up, and he had kind of relaxed with my presence. And after about 10 minutes of him being underneath the tree, I fell out the tree, and he kind of looked at me and just carried on, kind of, eating the food that was in his cheeks.
No, that's quite a story you've got there.
Yeah.
And there's a wonderful quote when I was preparing for this. I came across it that says, to truly understand Africa, you must go beyond the tourist trails, to venture into the heart of the wilderness. It's in the quiet moments, observing the animals in their natural habitat, that the continent reveals its secrets. And I think that would play to what you've said there. Is that
Absolutely.
These secrets
we see that every single day on. Sorry.
Yeah, these secrets are sort of moments in time, whether they've been captured by a camera or a cell phone. In your instance, it sounds like it wasn't. But those are moments in time that you can share with people, and that will stick with you forever.
Absolutely. And I love that what you just read. Could you actually send that to me? Because that's beautiful, and it couldn't be truer. Because it's the reference books we have, whilst they're great, we all know what a complicated procedure science can be, and peer reviewing, and before something ends up in the books, it's stuff that was studied 20, 30, 40 years ago, and what's being recorded today will only come out in the books in 10 years' time. We also have a saying as in the guides that the animals don't read the books. So we sometimes see behavior, and we open up the books, and there's absolutely no literature on this behavior. It actually happened to me the other day. We often speak about elephants and their incredible knowledge, their incredible everything. I mean, they're just an absolutely incredible species. And I was looking for literature on how elephants. So to go back a step further, I was on a game drive with a bunch of staff members, and the elephants started acting quite aggressively towards us. It's in an area where the elephants are very relaxed with us, and they're normally quite okay with our presence. In fact, they hang around by the lodge. All of a sudden, there was aggression, or what looked to be aggression. It definitely wasn't aggression. It was protectiveness. There was one of the staff ladies on the vehicle was pregnant, only 2 months or so. And I didn't even know at that stage. I was just assisting a lodge as a private guide. Then in between groups, there was no one staying in the lodge, and I took out the staff for a bumble. So I didn't even know that she was pregnant. As I said, she was about to go on maternity leave, but it was still quite early. All of a sudden, everyone in the vehicle, the shotgun lady, started screaming and said, "No, the elephant's going to kill us because there's a pregnant lady." I was like, "Whoa." The elephants are going to kill us. So I just calmed them down, and I said, "Relax here, the elephants are not going to kill anyone." But I found that really interesting as to how they have a belief. They had a firm belief that the elephants were going to kill somebody if there's a pregnant lady on the vehicle. Now, there's a lot of discussion about elephants being able to detect human pregnancy. So what was happening in that stage is that the elephants were extremely excited. That's what at least I felt, that the elephants were extremely excited and they were all responding to the vehicles. There was 2 or 3 herds feeding in the distance, and they were all responding to the vehicle curiously, and they became quite calm when they got close to the vehicle. And the one female put up her trunk and started smelling the air. But I think that their belief, and this is completely my own thought, I think that their belief comes from the fact that there can be aggressiveness when there's pregnant ladies around, but I think that it's for protection. There's also a story of a zookeeper in one of the zoos in America where she was pregnant. She didn't even know about it. And she came to work and the elephants threw her into the middle of the herd, and they all started being very protective. They weren't going to do anything to her, but they were going to do a lot of damage to anyone that tried to come too close to her or anyone that they were unhappy with. So, there was a bit of truth in the fact that the elephants can become, aggressive around the pregnant lady. But I had to calm the staff down. But I found it extremely interesting. It was the first time for me to experience how crazy these elephants looked, how incredible, and how they all responded to the vehicle because of a human pregnancy. Once again, I tried to find literature on that. There's very little bits available. There are some guide counts. I don't think that science would have written anything down yet on how they respond to pregnant ladies. But it's just something that really has been on the back of my head for a few weeks now, because that's what I saw was incredible.
Yeah, that's fascinating, Julian, to think that you have spent so much time in the bush and that it seems like every time, you're still learning something new. Mother Nature and the African bush is still teaching you something new that you were otherwise ignorant to, oblivious to, didn't know that was even something to look out for. Over that time frame that you've spent in the African bush, has there anything that stands out to you that you've changed your mind on, either on the African bush, on a particular animal, maybe through some introspection on yourself? You can take that question in any avenue that you'd like to.
Yes, actually, yes. And that's a very interesting question, because we often just think that we're okay, that we're okay doing that 10 meters off road, you won't do that much damage. And I think it really takes time before something inside you changes, where you realize, hang on a sec, the animal's actually not okay with you coming into the bush. I often used to. I like to think that I've changed to the best of my ability, and that's respect the bush, and she will really, really, really reward you. And that comes from a multitude of things. Whether you are going 5 meters off road to look at a flower, there is a little bit of negative impact that you can have on the bush by going off the road. You're actually creating you're affecting the aeration of the soil, you're compacting the soil. So where there are low vehicle densities and where the vegetation type allows, you can go off-road. But we tend to forget that, and we kind of think, okay, we need to get the best picture now, whether it's for the tips, because a lot of the guides do unfortunately think on the back of their heads. They sometimes do unethical things for gratuities. Essentially, they want to get their guests their best picture. These photographers come from all over the world, and you sometimes need to just remind yourself that tourism first, conservation first, tourism second. Conservation first, and sometimes it's just a simple flattening of the ears that a few years ago I actually wouldn't have even thought of. So when the animal is he's going to stick around because he's quite habituated to the presence of a game drive vehicle, you see the flattening of the ears, which is an indication that he's actually not as happy. Bundu bashing. I had a wonderful experience a couple of weeks ago when I was in the Masai Mara with a safari there. And I was not driving the vehicle. It was one of my first. I grew up in Kenya, but it was one of my first times back as a qualified guide, and I was still being shown the area. So I was actually being driven by a local Maasai, and we had an incredible leopard sighting, but the leopard was moving away from us. And we got to the Masai Mara is quite open, and we got to a thicket where 9 out of 10 of ethical guides in South Africa would have chosen the smallest tree, and they would have flattened that tree to get to the other side of the thicket. This Maasai did not. I was quite confused, and I asked him, is there a rule that you cannot kill trees? Because off-roading, we sometimes kill trees. Now, we drive over trees. We tend to choose, where possible, to choose the trees that we know are going to come back up. There are some trees that will be standing 20 minutes after you drive over it. They're quite elastic. but not all trees are. Some trees will die. But we don't think about it because we want to get to that amazing leopard picture, and we kill the tree. This Maasai, who was a local guy in the Masai Mara, did not kill a tiny little tree. And I thought there was a rule, so I asked him if there was a rule, and he said, no, absolutely not. We don't have many trees here, and we don't want to kill any of these trees. I was really, really well impressed by that, because he felt the pressure. I was with six clients who had been to Africa before, and you could feel the excitement. We all wanted to get to the other side of that thicket to see the leopard, but he was not feeling the pressure. I really enjoyed his calmness about it. He stopped. He said, "Sorry, guys, I'm not killing a tree, and I'm going to go around." I actually didn't sleep much that evening, because I myself I might have in that situation killed the tree, not thinking about it. We had an incredible sighting. We've now given these guys an incredible experience, an incredible picture, which will bring them back so you can look at it from that point of view. But actually, conservation first. In an area where there's not many trees, we can't be driving over trees. So, and I have to be honest, it took 7-8 years of guiding before that something triggered inside me, where I'm not going to off-road for an animal that's probably going to come to the road in 10 minutes' time if you're just patient enough. But sometimes we don't even look at the terrain, we don't look at our surroundings, we just bundu bash straight to them, take our pictures, and carry on our game drive, which is a little bit arrogant. If you can, invest the time, and I promise you the bush will reward you. She'll come, they'll come out to you. Allow them to become confident with or comfortable with our presence, and we'll have an incredible sighting. And that even goes for picking of flowers. Some guys go, "Oh, look at this incredible flower." They pick it, they bring it to the guest, they take a picture, they put it on their camera bag, take 2 pictures, and toss it overboard. That's not okay. But it sometimes takes a while for that something to change you, and that of course is the bush. Eventually, she'll teach you that you need to start respecting her a little bit more.
Yeah, that's such a vital thing to draw awareness to, Julian, because the African bush is such a vital part of our identity as South Africans. So much so we take for granted the fact that on our currency, on our paper notes, it's representative of the big five. That just shows you how entrenched wildlife on the African bush is in our identity as Africans and as South Africans. And
absolutely.
And what you've alluded to there is not only the big five, it's not the commercial aspect of the African bush, the tourism, it's the ethos behind the majesty of the African bush that is what people find so attractive about it. Yet it takes people like yourself and other like-minded guides and experts in the field to draw awareness to that ethos of what it means to be in the bush and what it means to respect the environment and the surroundings that you're in, as opposed to it being this commercial, go and grab a snapshot of the big five so that you can go and post it on Instagram and get 500 likes, So
absolutely.
I think that's a wonderful example to set, and hopefully people use your services.
Talking about alarm calls, there's a squirrel alarm calling behind me now. In a normal scenario, I'd be there checking what's going on there. I think it's potentially a snake or a monitor, so I won't go and check because it is very hot today. But you can probably hear him. I don't know if you did hear him.
Nice. We're getting like a little impromptu game drive here whilst we're recording.
It's on the there's a knobthorn behind me. It's definitely on that knobthorn, and there is a monitor that lives in there. We see him going in and out on a daily basis. So I think that's what she's alarming at.
Yeah, that's wonderful that you bring something like that up, because that's another vital lesson that people can learn from not only the African bush but nature as well. Is mindfulness. Being in
Absolutely.
the moment, being in the present, being aware of your surroundings. You've spoken at length earlier about how you have to be in tune with your senses when you're tracking, when you're walking in the African bush. But what that does is that's really food for the soul in terms of being able to just be mindful and be present. And you can't afford to let those opportunities go to waste because you think you need to respond to this email or that WhatsApp or that SMS. You need to phone this guy back. And in that respect, being in the African bush is really like an elixir for the soul.
Is like what? Sorry, say the last sentence again. I didn't hear you.
An elixir for the soul.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, Julian, tell me, what do you have that's exciting you in the future? What have you got on the horizon? What are you excited about? Share with me what you're going to be up to in the next couple of months.
So we're actually very excited about what's to come. We are now moving into this very interesting friend of mine who's now becoming more involved. He's actually a client. He's been back for about 6 times, and we are starting up a potential project on. I'm not going to say too much because it hasn't started yet, but it really excites me because it's more about the ecologically sensitive side of safaris. So from a broader perspective, low impact tourism, ecotourism, responsible tourism, and since this thing changed within me, I've actually stopped supporting some lodges and started looking at other lodges. Just because I really want to know that everything is done properly from the communities, that they are doing their best they can to recycle. We really have a responsibility here, and it's not just the hotel industry. Safaris is about educating. It's about planting a seed to those guests. Hopefully, they go home and that seed, that tree can flourish. But it's really just about mindfulness from everything you do, from the first coffee that you have, which companies you're supporting, right up until the moment you go to bed. You have to be mindfulness about everything that you're consuming. How did it get here? How responsible is the tourism? Are the people being looked after? Are the communities benefiting from it? So we're very excited. Next month is going to be a bit of a test run. We're doing a few testers to see how and where, in which direction this goes. But we're no longer going to be ordering foods from the big supermarkets. It's all going to be locally grown, locally sourced. And I would have always been doing it from the past, but it's obviously a logistics thing. But enough excuses now. You can make the logistics happen if you really want to, and therefore, yeah, we're going to start moving into the space of really rustic travel. I'll still have the safari business going forward. I'll still have all my Italian guests coming out. But yeah, really something to do in the quieter months, and also a feeling of being fulfilled, really making a difference, because we are in the right industry where we can make a difference.
Wonderful. Such noble and exciting work on the horizon for you. I love that. And then people who want to get in contact with you and they want to make use of your expert guidance and services at Blackfoot Safaris, where can they find you? I'll attach the link in the show notes as well for the list.
Okay, perfect. So we are on social media. We're on social media. We got a website as well. It's www.blackfootsafaris.com, and they'll be able to get all the information to reach out to them. And then it's about getting as much info as possible and making dreams come true, really.
Wonderful. Julian, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you. I thoroughly enjoyed our discussion. Good luck with all the excellent work that you're doing, and who knows, maybe I'll see you up there soon.
Please come here, Clinton. I've already told you. I've given you enough reason to. Thanks very much for inviting us out again, and thanks so much for your time.
Let me level with you. It is such a cool feeling when I see that Spotify subscribers number increase on the weekly, when I see the number of people listening to the episodes going up, and it really makes a huge difference. Have you ever done something and you feel so good when you get rewarded by some positive feedback and you really feel like you're making a difference? That's what it means to me, and that's how I feel. And it goes a long way if you like the show, share it and subscribe it. Thank you humbly, and I'll see you next week.